and especially thank you for Kitty to arrange this. And it's good to see all faces here again. And so I'm happy. Well, doesn't look like. Yeah.
Old faces and older faces.
Okay, I'm happy to coming back. And well, this afternoon I'm going to talk about my thesis. And well, since it's all our RPS insiders, so I will skip some of the unimportant information, but just more direct to what the research is about. Okay, the title was Changing Centralities under Urban Configurational Scale Structure, and research subjects about the changing spatial conditions for market and retail areas, and the case area is in Beijing. Well, I would like to start with this very simple word of changing or change, because this is a kind of a very easy experience when we're talking about developing cities like Beijing. There are booming populations during the last decades with the booming economy and the urban sprawl very much. And the urban lives and economics also changed a lot during this last 30 years. And well, there are also the transportation patterns and technologies also changed a lot. But however, somehow we found, although there are many changes, somehow I still have the question, have we really changed that much? For instance, the ice cream vendor spot in Forbidden City, and now although they sell completely different products, we have more choices now, but still it's in the same area and serving the same functions. And also about the urban life, there are still kind of continuities during these changes. And this kind of stability in changes, initially we could think of this in two ways. First, the place remains highly stable, and secondly, the old ways of urban life still remains stable. There's something that I need to mention about this kind of disparity. Sorry, guys. There's something I would like to mention about the disparities happened in the last decades, because the development is not very even. There are rich people and there are a lot of poor people. So the Gini coefficient, which is a kind of measurement globally to show this kind of disparity, shows that China as a whole in 2010 has already exceeded 0.5, which is definitely very high. And Beijing especially is among the highest cities in China. The Guangdong province is the top and Beijing is second. But Guangdong province, there you have a lot of factories with very rich managers and bosses, and a lot of cheap labor forces. So that's why you have this kind of big contrast. But Beijing as a metropolitan, most people are in a kind of urban environment. So I think this problem is becoming more and more serious. And well, in terms of the spatial development, this impact of the rapid urban development and the local life can be reflected in two scales. For instance, in the height scale, we can see this kind of renovation project happening in Beijing. What you see from this picture is Qianmen area. That's a kind of this project was began in 2007, just right before the starting of the Olympic Games. And previously it was a kind of top one shopping street in Beijing, full of people and activities. After refurbished, the images became more beautiful, and they rebuilt this kind of gate structure. In Chinese, we call it pailou. And also they bring back the old style, the trend, as a kind of ornament of urban spaces. But what is activities there is highly, how to say, regulated. I'm quite surprised to see this big bulletin board placed on the entrance of this street. And there are a lot of activities prohibited. For now, I even cannot understand all of them, but I think the thing can be done in a much simpler way, just to say shopping and taking pictures are permitted on the street, why not? Well, the problem can be say is a kind of thematization and museumization of this kind of high-profile urban spaces. And on the other hand, in local scale, what's happening is for the inner city, there are a lot of old traditional areas, housing areas being redeveloped into kind of more modernized multi-story housing areas, while the urban life contents in those areas somehow is being wiped away after this developments. From the picture, we can see the illegal street vendors selling fruit, and the kind of tension between this government regulation and this kind of macroeconomic activities. So on this scale, the problem could be understood as a kind of lack of local street vitality. But however, this problem is not always the case. It doesn't happen everywhere. For instance, there is still a kind of self-organized development, kind of self-organized spatial uses happening to revitalize some of these areas. For instance, at high scale, this square was being well used during the night as a place for gathering and dancing. And some high-level commercial spaces in the early morning being used as a food market. And in local scale, some very modern housing areas, the activities on the street quickly coming back. So this vitality of public spaces is lack to do with the type of architecture or kind of humanistic scale in this sense, but it's more follows a kind of spatial logic of their own, which is related with the movement in urban spaces. So what this thesis concerns more is a kind of local everyday life instead of large urban project. It's a kind of self-organized use of urban spaces. And the central topic is to explore kind of spatial logic for different scale centers to emerge. And the research itself has two parts. The first part is kind of historical one, which I will look back how this urban planning traditions in China cope with these forces of market, and by focusing the example of how market was placed in these ideal cities. And the second part is a kind of contemporary research. It focuses on firstly how the scale structure in movement networks are constructed, and secondly how the metropolitan scale and local scale centers start to change under this spatial structure. And I'll start also, I would like to give some theoretical background of this research, because the central topic of this is explore a kind of spatial logic. So I would like to mention that there was a kind of traditional theory, central play theory, that's dealing with this topic. And the famous American scholar Skinner did some path-making work by studying the Chinese cities in the late empirical period in China. And there's also a lot of Chinese scholars who did interesting research based on central play theory in Beijing. But recently, well, there are many questions, many arguments against the central play theory. And especially, I would like to mention Taylor. He proposed a central flow theory, which is based on the paradigm of networks instead of hierarchy.